In October 2023, a woman approached Delhi High Court for termination of pregnancy after the legal limit. That grabbed my attention and wanted to analyze why women do this at late stages. Then, I went a little deep into the case and found some inconsistencies on the woman's part. Obviously, there was a lot of buzz and debate around this, but I felt people have not focused on the important aspects of it when the news was still hot and active. So I decided to revisit it and do a short video essay exploring the case from a different lens and call it What is the Responsibility of a Victim? Let's dive in. What do you think it takes to consider the following statements to be true? God Vinayaka consumed the prasad his devotee offered. Jesus resurrected from death. Muhammad flew on a horse and cut the moon in half. A UFO landed on Charminar. A woman claimed that her husband sexually assaulted her. If your answer is that they are true, there's no need to prove, and we should accept them at face value, then that is a problem. We live in an age where we easily tend to believe women's allegations compared to the frequency at which we believe religious miracles or UFO conspiracies, even though the lack of evidence is common in all those situations. Ever more so, we are ready to immediately believe the victimization of women and the worst in males, but rarely the opposite scenario. Time and again, we've seen women making loudest noise on social media about minor stupid inconveniences and turning it into an issue of public spaces not being women friendly enough, and that the society must step up to compensate those needs, and only then the world would become perfect, they say. Properly searched, we can also see social media users wishing death and strict punishment upon people who fail to help victims of abuse, especially women. They say that it is a common man's responsibility to immediately come to the rescue. But no one seems to clearly point out the responsibility of the female victims if they truly are. Consider these examples. I looked at them and immediately thought, hey, what about carrying extra pads and tracking your own cycle? I also noticed personal responsibility definitely seems to be a kryptonite for such women. I wasn't even surprised anymore on how they feel entitled to be provided for. These women were irresponsible and expected the world to bail them out. Blaming someone else for their own irresponsibility has stood out as the common pattern in all these cases. This is what it looked like to me on a whole. Woman forgets pads, blames it on PVR. Woman forgets to track her cycle, blames it on the airlines. Woman trusts a man blindly and makes a poor choice, blames it on the Indian policies and matrimonial sites. But I ask again, what about the woman's responsibility then? Let's take a look at how much serious the other case is. The one where 22-week pregnant woman approached the court, which is the central topic of our discussion today, that shares a common pattern that I have been discussing so far. I'll give you a moment to take a look at the news. I have also added the links for reference. If interested, you can pause the video here, finish reading it up, and come back to this. Here's the shorter version. The woman got married in May 2023. She found out about pregnancy in June, says that the husband and family forced her to pregnancy. Matter reached the Delhi High Court in October. She claims that the husband assaulted her on July 7th and also in August. The woman requests for abortion under Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act after the legal limit is crossed, stating unwanted pregnancy, and the reason behind that being abuse by husband and his family. Here's the important thing to notice. The court pointed out that the woman had not filed any FIR against her husband and had also not filed any petition for divorce or judicial separation from her husband so far. The lack of action in the period between July and October is questionable, and in my observation, the woman showed no regard for the life that's been growing inside her. But to openly state all this is perceived as a form of victim blaming and shaming. I can hear you clearly. What prompted her to not file a complaint after the alleged assault when she had the window of opportunity to report as facilitated by the law may forever remain a mystery with endless speculations and no fruitful outcome. But is it really that difficult to deduce, though? It's almost as if the woman is encouraging herself to build a victim narrative instead of following the due procedure clearly laid down by law. The message that comes out of her silence or lack of action is that she clearly understands how exaggerated claims and victimhood status hold more authenticity in the eyes of the media, the public, and in the court of law. Unlocking public sympathy with immediate effect, she seemed to have begun the journey of the survivor who was bravely fighting against the norms of patriarchy. This understanding doesn't require a degree in women's studies. Bizarrely, absence of evidence somehow qualifies this woman for an elevated victimhood status, devoid of any personal responsibility, while retaining moral innocence that deserves attention, care, and compensation. You know who it resembles? A child. This is where the feminists raise the card of pseudo academic trauma theory, suggesting that her silence or lack of action is itself proof that abuse definitely happened. Only an abuse, the trauma theory famously claims, that is so patriarchy derived would cripple all her faculties of rational decision making, which would also oftentimes result in forgetfulness. That is, the victim's inability to accurately recall the events which prevented her from reporting. Any statement such as, "Why didn't she complain early? Why didn't she say no? Why did she come out now at 22 weeks?" are seen as patriarchal and misogynistic. This is how feminist language blocks the commoner from analyzing or questioning a woman's personal failure to report or submit evidence, and shifts the focus by blaming a fabricated threat called as systemic oppression that allegedly restricted the woman's coming forward. Notice how quickly and temporarily these women naturally align themselves to victimhood status. And as soon as blaming patriarchy ends, and if her much deserved compensation is fulfilled, her status would now blossom to that of an empowered being. The journey from helpless victim to brave survivor who fought a noble fight against oppressive patriarchal forces would now be complete. The media would run the story, and all women would celebrate it as a great victory. What feminists fail to understand is that when one holds unfalsifiable, undisprovable claims as proof of abuse while remaining closed to any form of scrutiny, it calls for immediate disqualification. And that should be dismissed due to lack of credibility. Because the principle is very simple: what is said without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. The extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Where feminism has succeeded, though, is convincing women to confidently use that lack of evidence as a tool to shame people for not believing the victim, thereby achieving a morally superior pseudo status that now shields them from any criticism whatsoever. After much analysis, this is what I think is happening. The sisterhood, in the twisted, revenge filled, jaundiced view of reality, is completely okay to let an innocent man die out of a mere accusation, however false it is, to compensate for their existential fear that a guilty man would walk free. The concept of "no innocent man shall bear the brunt of wrongful punishment" does not get into the thick skulls. And these are the questions that I'm left with. When feminists continue to gatekeep the linguistic arena, how shall anyone be able to participate in the discourse about reporting abuse or assault as soon as possible as a part of recognizing and encouraging victim responsibility without it being perceived as victim blaming or shaming? Where should the woman's right to abortion end and the unborn child's right to live begin? If men should not participate in these discussions, should women also not participate in decisions involving voting for policies that affect men and their bodies? Should women judges be allowed to pass judgments of punishment in the cases involving men? Should we believe all women or verify all women? Could this be the story? The lady had sex with her husband, but later decided to change her mind post the legal limit for reasons unknown. She knows that she can falsely accuse her husband of domestic abuse, and the court would grant her the permission to abort the baby. This would make it easier for her to shift the blame and never accept any accountability on her part. Doesn't this reveal that our Indian constitution, which is feminist in nature, exists solely to safeguard women from sexually irresponsible behavior via abortion? Now take a look at the similar case around the same time where Justice Nagaratna said the following. If you notice it, the marker for life oscillates between these two scenarios. Scenario 1, when the lady wants to continue the pregnancy, and the scenario 2, when the lady doesn't want to. Keep in mind that the biological constitution remains unaffected in both the scenarios. However, it is the mood of the woman that decides the fate of the child. What a low for humans to entertain this position in 2024. But this seems to be not enough for the female kind. They want to keep pushing the boundaries for sexually responsible behavior and expect it to be bailed out. Consider this: if the fetus has really no separate identity, why is it called a double homicide when a pregnant woman is killed? And the person is held guilty for culpable homicide when the unborn child of a mother is killed. Also, keep in mind that this will be the case, irrespective of whether or not the woman wants to keep the child. So, I'd like to further ask, can it still be called a double homicide if we learn after the accident that the woman was not intending to continue the pregnancy, and therefore the double homicide charges on the person would now be reduced to a single? What I all want you to focus on is the attitude towards life and children that women have in general, and how they encourage other women to carry this false pride out of self assigned moral superiority under the pretext of my body, my choice. If this isn't on the nose blatant disregard for child life, I don't know what else is. Think about it. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video.